Grief is messy, and I'm no maid. This is Every Widow Thing. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Every Widow Thing. I'm here with the usuals, Kira, Holly, and Whitney. I'm Lacey, and today we have a special guest, Shellie or Sheba. Welcome.
And thank you for having me.
We received a message on Instagram a while back from one of our listeners. They wished that we would address having a partner because this particular person didn't get married. They were planning on getting married, but they hadn't gotten married because there were some other things that had to take place first. So we have Shellie here today because unfortunately she has something in common with us. She lost her partner back in 2018. When I met Shellie, I was talking to the girls and we were like, yes, we should absolutely have her on the show if she'd be willing to do it. So we really appreciate you being on our show today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I just hope I can provide, some value to people in my situation.
I think you will. A little brief background that I know just from talking to you. Andrew sounded amazing. He was a father first and foremost to 2 kids, your partner. He was a contributor to Outside Magazine, which is a really cool magazine. He's an amazing athlete. He was a cyclist, and he was a book author, and sounded like a really cool, deep guy from what I could understand and what people had said about him. So I think starting out, we could talk about maybe a fun story about how you guys met, and then talk a little bit about your life together with your kids.
Yeah, so it is a fun story how we met. We met on the World Wide Web, OkCupid, and I had joined.
Oh, wow. We haven't talked about that.
I had joined OkCupid because my oldest son said, this is where you get the better quality of individuals. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I had no luck in dating online. It had been awful.
Yeah.
We can relate.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
I responded to Andrew. And we went back and forth, multiple times a day for quite a long time.
On the app? On the
app, yeah. And at one point, he comes back and he says, you're not going to believe this. I know your son, Jordan.
I think that'd be a little
so,
disconcerting.
At first he's Googling me, I now know, which is kind of creepy, right?
Right, but we all
do it.
Wait,
we all do it.
out.
Everybody's guilty of that.
And so he typed in my name, which is spelled with an I-E, and he typed in triathlete. And I came up. And so he saw the last name, which is very uncommon. It's Oroshiba. And he said, I know your son. You're not going to believe it, but he's actually my cycling coach. And I said, what?
Isn't that crazy?
Oh,
What?
wow. That's crazy.
Oh my God.
And he went on to say,
Her son, the 20-something,
Yeah.
is this guy's. That's crazy.
That makes me think there's a lot of talking when you're with your coach or an instructor about life and stuff. So I would think he found out a lot about your family. Like he knew stuff about
you
and
already.
your family.
Absolutely.
That wasn't on OkCupid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
this is true. I hadn't actually thought about that. But Andrew said, you know what? If we meet and nothing happens, he never has to know. But Jordan was right downstairs. And so I ran downstairs and I asked him, firstly, is this going to compromise your coaching-client relationship, right? Yeah. And then secondly, should your mom go out
what
with
do you
him?
think about him? Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, this is the funniest thing. He said, Andrew never does his workouts like he's supposed to.
That was the little tidbit
bringing
that he
endorsement.
gave you.
But I think he's a nice guy and you should go out on a date with him.
Aw.
So,
And it took several months before you actually went out with him, didn't it?
yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Were you just busy or were you just not sure?
It took a while, and no, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. It had been years since I dated. So, but also his divorce was finalizing, and I was pretty particular about not seeing him until things were completed. And
That makes sense.
and so, yeah, I went on my first date with him on May 1st of 2014. And he had gone to court to finalize the papers earlier that day. So
Oh, wow.
You wanted to
That's
celebrate
so
with
way
something.
to, like,
What a way to remember it.
I didn't waste any
final.
time.
Exactly.
First, I have to
Or
back
not.
up. I have to backtrack because I had been at this place called the Driveway, and that's a place where they race bikes. My son raced bikes, and so I just had low expectations, and I was sweaty, and I wasn't wearing makeup, and I
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
wearing anything nice.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, I was like, he's gonna like me or not. And
I love that.
he came in, and he's all dressed up, and wearing a nice collared shirt, and I felt like sort of a jerk.
You guys start dating in 2014, and how long were you together? When did it get serious?
It didn't take very long. I think by about the third date, we actually went to Kerrville, and we had planned some ride routes, and it was in the summer. It happened to be particularly hot, and on the second day, we had planned a 100-mile bike ride.
As
And
one would do
As
on
I
a
always
date.
do on all
I
my
had
dates.
so many dates like that.
Same.
I mean, almost everyone.
Well, I did a
at
marathon.
least 100 miles.
so anyway, I'd mapped it out. I'd spent some time figuring out where all the little towns were so we could get water. Those weren't towns. There was no water.
There's no towns. It's just a
there was
stop
one
sign.
place that there was a post office box, and we'd been out of water for a long
Oh my
time.
gosh.
And so, but there's somebody washing their postal vehicle with a hose in the back of the post office. I go immediately to fill my water bottles and drink out of the hose. And I went to hand it to Andrew, and he said, I can't drink out of that. And I was like, what do you mean you can't drink out of it? But he wasn't having anything to do with it. I think he'd had Giardia before, so it was a
Oh,
worse
no,
than
that's
that.
pretty
that was
bad.
it.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But anyway, it was air conditioned. So we lay down on the post office floor.
Oh my gosh.
And someone came in, and I thought she was an angel because she said, "Are you guys okay?" And Andrew was never a quiet person. So he blurted out, "We need water." and this woman came back from her car with those huge smart water bottles.
Oh,
how nice.
that's-
Usually when you face that sort of adversity, that's when people get angry, they lose their patience. And he never did. He never did. I just remember that night, and my gosh, we were so tired. But I just looked at him, and I was like, I have two choices. I can not go down this road, or I'm going to go all the way down this road. There was no in between. So I knew pretty early
So
on.
you were really into him right
That's
off the
really
bat.
cool.
Yeah.
And that day kind of solidified your feelings at that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So how did in the dating aspect of it, I know you commingled families, like how did that come about?
I think because parenting was so important to both of us that we really wanted to spend time with the families together. I think the first trip we took was that summer. We took the kids down to Padre Island in Mexico, and it was fantastic. They got along great. They're close to the same ages.
What were everyone's ages, the children at that time?
And so Isaac was 14. He might have been 13, 14. Layla was 11 or 12. Those are Andrew's kids. And then Ethan, my youngest son, was just a few months younger than Layla.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all pretty close in age.
And they all got along really well, and it was kind of an immediate thing, or was it? Did it take a while?
It was easy.
Yeah.
It was easy. And
So talk to us about you've met this great guy. The kids seem to be working, gelling,
mhm.
doing well together, but you made an interesting decision.
So
What was
we
that like?
we knew that the intention was to live together and combine the families, but we knew that that's a big move, and you don't want to be wrong about doing something like that
Right.
when you're involving the children, right?
Yeah.
And so I think early that fall we decided to go start doing some counseling, just to work through potential conflicts, and we felt by the time we came around the first of the year, we felt pretty confident about doing that. And so they moved in. They all moved into my home in January
of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow.
Pretty quick.
Amazing.
That is. That's
So it had been about 6 months-ish since you met?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a little more than that. But yeah, so I call it a year because that's how long we'd been talking. Yeah.
Well, I met and married in 8 months, so hey, you know, when
But
you know, you know.
But you actually decided not to get married. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or it had just not come
It
up
hadn't.
yet.
It wasn't something.
No, we talked about it. We talked about it. I don't think at that point we were talking about it, but I think, you know, it was definitely our intention. But by the time we were really ready to do something like that, the kids were in the midst of, they're going to prom, they're graduating, they're getting their driver's licenses, and it just, you know, it wasn't our time
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
to have the spotlight. It,
Sure.
it
We
was
can
theirs.
understand that.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
as we all do, we think we have plenty of time to make those choices down the line, and we'll just wait. And then what happened?
I guess what we want to know is we haven't told everybody what happened to Andrew. So
Oh, okay.
you can talk about how many years in before that fateful day.
Yeah. Well, you know, we lived together and there were conflicts but we had really similar parenting styles. And that's one of the things we went through in counseling. But we did that for a few years. And we did vacations together. You know, Andrew sold his BMW and got a minivan, which I'm still driving.
That is commitment.
Yeah.
That is.
He's all in.
So
Yeah.
in your mind, you're really already man and wife. You're already married. It was just a legal matter that
Mhm.
had to be taken care of. So
And we
And
took
you
care
even
of
had
things.
and you had a legal
We took
document.
care of things. Yeah, we got an attorney and we did our wills. You know, we did all the final documents that everyone should have. But you know, we really thought we had things secured. The kids were on my health insurance. Andrew was on my health insurance, and so yeah, we felt like we had sort of checked off all the boxes. But Andrew went for a bike ride.
And this is what day?
It's February 17th of 2018.
So you're 4 years together at this point.
Andrew went on a bike ride, which he liked to do. He had this team called VOP, which people joked was very old people riding their bike.
He was 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was
So
50,
young.
52.
Yeah. It gets younger every year to me, too.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it was just a normal day. It was just a normal morning.
Now, did you go with him?
No, and I went with them sometimes, but they were just too fast for me. I was tired. I didn't feel like getting dropped, and you get dropped, and then you're riding your bike alone. And they do this really hard route where they go over the dam loop, and it's just huge hills, right? But anyway, there was a substantial group, and I didn't think anything of it. Like, I started getting pictures out because we had purchased frames and we were going to hang some more pictures.
Wow.
Give me a minute.
That's okay.
Yeah, this
It's
is the hard
This
part.
is hard.
Um,
Well, one thing that our listeners ought to know is that Shellie talks about like this was a tough cycling event, but you're a triathlete. Like you're as athletic as he
Mhm.
is.
yeah, we were nuts together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people ought to know that was not unusual for you to go with him on those bike rides, but this particular day you had decided to stay back.
Yes. And I got a call from one of his teammates, and he said, "There's been an accident." Then he said, "Prepare yourself because it's really bad."
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
So he was changing a flat tire well off the road on 620, which is apparently a place we learned later where there are a lot of accidents and there have been some deaths. But, people would ride by him as teammates and they'd ask if he needed help. And he said, no, I'll just meet you up at the water stop, which wasn't too far ahead. And I just think about, had he not done that, there would have been multiple tragedies. Yeah.
Mm.
And so it was just a really freak accident. There was a truck coming south that crossed over the double line. And it's a pretty high rate of speed out there, because we like to drive fast here in Texas. But people drive faster than the speed limit on that road because it's very hilly. So a woman crossed over the center line, hit another truck head on, and then her truck proceeded to spin into where Andrew was changing his flat right off the side of the road.
So none of his mates were with him. They were all ahead, and
Some of them were behind.
so some people
Some of them saw
the accident.
like his little blinky light and his little tail light, and then it wasn't there anymore. Like there was a father and son riding a tandem that saw it.
Oh, gosh.
So he was taken to the hospital. He said, they triaged him. He wasn't conscious. And so I rushed to the hospital. I happened to be relatively close because I was going into town to plant a brick for a good friend's memorial, ironically. I called his ex-wife first because the kids were with him. And I said, I don't know, just let me figure out, what's going on, and I'll call you back. And so, but she didn't wait for me to call her back. She headed out too. And I got into the emergency room, and it was pretty empty, but there was a charge nurse there, or the person that was doing the admitting. And I told her who I was there for and that it was bad. And she just wouldn't look me in the eyes. And I just knew. Yeah. And so, but the charge nurse did come back and take me into a little room. And he said that they'd moved him to get some imaging done. And his heart had stopped, and they'd been doing CPR. Yeah, and I remember we sat for it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And I just said, stop it. So he was hit at the base of his head. So that's where your basic functioning occurs.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And so, everyone's calling everyone. And pretty soon, the waiting room was chaos with all the kids from St. Stephen's and their parents. And I think they actually tried to shove us off to a side room somewhere. But it was just, it was awful.
Yeah.
People were screaming and crying. And I mean, there was nothing I could do.
I'm so sorry.
There's nothing you can do in that
Of course
moment.
not.
We are so grateful that you're
Okay.
willing to talk about it because it is very traumatic. And especially, we don't know you, but if you're not the type of person that really talks about it very often anyway, it's even more difficult.
That's the hardest part, is not having anybody. For me, it was, I don't know about for you, that you don't have anybody who can relate to what you've been through.
Well,
It is. It's very isolating.
yes. Grief in itself is isolating. And I think in your circumstance, you are this woman who's in love. You have a partner that you live with. You've filled out all the forms and, have everything taken care of. But the term widow is reserved for a wife. So it brings into play, what is a widow? Because in my mind, you are very much a widow. And and I don't know, for me, the title means something to me. I tell everybody that I'm a
Anybody
widow.
will listen. That's what we like.
Yeah, everybody
loves to say
I
it.
mean,
She said
grocery
the guard,
store,
the person
waiter.
at the
Oh, yeah.
gas attendant.
Guy at the
I'm just
bar. Yeah. That's
I'll
a
just try that on.
title
kidding. Yeah,
that
try it on for a while.
is meaningful when you're going through something like this. It kind of explains to people in one word.
Right.
So that's
You don't have a box. I wondered that, when we go
To
to the
check the
doctor, in your case, this is why when that person wrote into Instagram, it made a lot of sense to have someone who could speak to that. You could tell us now after the fact, then what happens, when you are not married and your partner, and you had a will, but what happens then?
Well, I mean, it started basically from the very beginning.
I was thinking that you might say you showed up at the hospital and they wouldn't speak to you, which I think might also be a circumstance.
Unless there's a durable power of attorney.
Did you have power of attorney when you
Yes.
did the paperwork?
Yes.
So why wouldn't that be you? If
Yeah, I had the
ex-wife-
durable power of attorney. And so in a lot of what instances. I had the responsibility
Mm-hmm.
of a legal spouse, a legal widow.
All the paperwork
Yeah, and costs.
and cost,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
but none of the compassion.
Well,
Or did you I
and-
imagine
and
you
I
had
would-
compassion with his cycling crew because those were your people, weren't they?
yeah, like they all, I was getting messages and phone calls and everything the next day, and I was a mess. But people were crying, and I just said, "Open up the house."
Yeah.
So that's what we did. I don't remember much of it.
And there was a big
But-
memorial, I understand, too. Did you do the
Yes.
planning for that?
Yeah, so we had there were several services, and there was contention about that too, right?
And that's contention between you and whom?
Mainly Andrew's sister about what was wanted. There was an argument about whether or not he'd be cremated, and I was like, "Well, Andrew wanted to be cremated. We talked about this," and she was adamant that he wouldn't be cremated, and so all of these little rifts start to take place. But
And you're in the middle of your grief, deep grief, shock. And now you're having to have these conversations. You're not united, or they don't defer to you. Is
correct.
that, yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
So-
I think it was one of the kids in that argument about being cremated or not being cremated that stood up and said, "Dad wanted to be cremated," and so that was the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's cool.
just people having to pull the kids to take sides, and things that should have never happened.
You seem to try to check all the boxes. Is there anything that, looking back now, you're like, we should have done this, or besides getting married?
Make sure your paperwork is in order.
What would that be?
So it depends on the state that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Texas recognizes common law. And
Which
so
is 10 years or is there
No,
a year
there's
statute?
not even.
No?
No,
Okay.
as long as you declare yourself publicly or show
Okay.
yourself as married. And there was a big contention about that. In retrospect, I should have gotten an attorney, but I didn't.
Well, we talk about it all
Yeah.
the time, just all
I
the things
mean-
that you have to all of a sudden take care of when you are dealing with the worst possible thing that you have ever dealt with.
And it was sudden. So it's not like you had time, over a long illness to talk to him about
Right.
how things would play out.
No, just a few days later, we were in San Francisco at his synagogue memorial, and then there was another synagogue service here, and then a few months later, the memorial that you talked about, which was huge. We had to wait a few months because Isaac was in Patagonia hiking at the time. Yeah.
Oh.
How did this contention between other family members or whoever it ended up being, maybe his parents, his family, did the paperwork that you filled out, did that ultimately end any arguments that were
No.
being handled?
So what should have been in place for things to have been more palatable towards someone who was not
So
yet married?
if you declare yourself as common law, and you could do this in other states too, make sure you have a document that says that.
That you are
a
considering
notarized
yourself.
document
Yeah.
that says
Mhm.
that. I didn't have that.
And a will wouldn't be enough, and your power of attorney wouldn't be enough.
Wow.
Right.
That's crazy.
Doesn't
doesn't that-
common law just say that you're cohabitating, that you share the same
No,
residence? Or what is-
that you refer to each other as married. Like you
Okay.
consider yourselves married,
Okay.
which is sort of vague, right? I mean,
Well, it's
Yeah.
crazy because you've
seems
done
like you
you're
shouldn't
living
need it.
together.
I wouldn't
You're
have thought
on each
that.
Sounds a
you're
little
on
vague
each
to
other's
me.
insurance. You've got power of attorney. You've got wills.
So
You would think all of that would be.
You would think,
enough.
really, they could
Mhm.
prove that if you're not only living together, but because they were on your insurance. So it
Right.
was
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, everything
His kids
is.
were on your insurance.
Yeah.
So what
for many
happened?
months after he passed, even.
So what was not in place, like for their family to realize that you're not?
So
Like a
one
married
of the
couple.
things that went on with the will was that there were underlying contracts that weren't taken care of in the background. And so, say for instance, I take out a life insurance policy and I put somebody else's name on it as a beneficiary. It doesn't matter if you give that to us in the will, that supersedes it.
Yeah, the name on
And-
the beneficiary. I see.
Yeah.
So like those things weren't changed
Those things
to
weren't
match the
changed.
will.
Exactly. exactly.
So his life insurance went to his children, or did some of it go to the ex-wife?
Most of it went to
for
his,
child support.
Most of it went to his sister. There's some sort of rule that if you're divorced and they're listed as a beneficiary, that they will wipe that claim just because you're divorced. But then if there's a secondary, that's where it goes.
Okay. So in the will, you were supposed to get the life insurance, but then these other documents superseded.
The assets would have been in the estate. Yes.
Okay, interesting.
So here you are, were you responsible for the cost of the funeral, and yet you weren't getting any money that would help offset those costs? Because funerals are expensive.
The memorial was expensive. I got reimbursed by some of it by his executor. So
Well, that's at least something.
And then the estate got sued for things like extra child support and other things that I'm not super privy to. So I'd hesitate to talk too much about them. But yes, there were several lawsuits threatened, attorneys involved.
A nightmare.
But you didn't have an attorney for yourself.
I didn't.
Well, that costs money too to have one represent you hourly.
And I would have, but it was important to me, especially since apparently the sister never liked me, which I didn't know. I wish I would have known that ahead of time. You know, we just visited her over Thanksgiving. You know.
Well, who told you that she didn't like you? Or is it just the way you were treated after the fact that
she told me?
Feel that way? Oh,
she
wow,
told me.
that's horrible.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't have a relationship with her, I assume, now?
No.
So
no.
where does his family live? Are they
in the Bay Area?
Oh, okay.
But the kids, you have a relationship with his
I have the
children.
kid, and that's why I didn't hire an attorney, because there was all this contention, and it would have been important to Andrew for me to maintain a relationship with the children.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that speaks volumes too about the true relationship that was going on in that household, that they, even after their father's death, still have a relationship with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did they go back with their mom full time?
Yeah, they never, I had to clean out their rooms, pack their boxes for them.
So it's more than, the loss of your partner, but this whole family and life, just like ours, was completely torn apart.
Well, and like your kids and his kids were by then like siblings.
Yeah.
It sounded like.
The two boys were super close. They used to go riding bikes. They used to go mountain biking together. So.
And one of them's
That's
really big into
sad.
music. Your son is really big into music. And wasn't that some sort of bonding between the kids too?
Yeah. They were all musical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember
They
you
never
saying
saw
something
each other
about
again?
that.
So the kids, we've seen them.
Okay.
We've seen them. They just didn't. They
Live
never came
with
back
you.
to the house. They never came back to the house.
But you didn't have much tension with his ex-wife, though.
Not at the time. No.
Not at the time.
So it was more the sister that kind of came into play right after.
Yeah. But things soured.
Was trying to call the
things
shots.
soured with the ex afterwards. So that made it hard.
So everyone's kind of spiraling in their own grief and not really thinking about what Andrew would have wanted.
That's a really good
And you are the only person that is trying to maintain that.
I felt like that,
Yeah.
Especially early on, but when we did the memorial, Madeline, his ex, and I, we worked together to do the planning. We didn't have any contention. It wasn't until later on. So I don't know if the sister, I think, got to his ex.
That was 2018.
2018.
And now how are you doing? What does your life look like? And how is Andrew still a part of it?
Well, I finally got rid of his bikes. I finally donated those, but I just did that last month.
Yeah.
I had a hard time touching anything in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no timeline for any
Right.
of that.
And, people say, well, that's not healthy. And I was like, this is what I need.
What do they know? What do
I think
they
you
know?
can do it. I've found, because, there's things I still haven't been able to, but like I would do it like in little bits and pieces. You break it down and you do what you can, and you fall apart. You donate the bikes, you fall apart for a few days, and then you don't do anything for a while. Like you've done that piece, and then you move on. And then when you're ready, you'll do another little piece.
And if you kept his bikes forever? Who cares?
fine.
That's fine if it brings you
Yeah.
comfort.
Well, it's important to me. I'm like, okay, how are these going to go to the best use, right?
Mhm.
Like, how
Yeah.
can I make lemonade out of lemons?
Yeah.
So I think I got really stuck on that, and I was having a hard time. Like, what's the perfect place? And
Sure.
I have to say something that I saw the other day because we just became friends recently, and then we just friended each other on Facebook, and literally like 2 down because I'm like, oh, I'd love to know more about her because we just met. I love the little bags of treats that you created. You'll have to tell them that story. I just thought this speaks to your heart. And I love that because it's not been easy for you, but you found some way to channel goodness, even though things have been really hard for you. So tell them about that.
I try, because that's really sort of incompatible with grief. But I really tried to do that and tried to have gratitude. And so it was Thanksgiving, and the kids weren't coming home, and I was just sad. And so I had a little like meltdown over like all of Andrew's like socks. He had just had gazillions of them. And I get mad at all his stuff sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
Because I've got to clean it all out, but which isn't really right either. But I decided to make some bags for the homeless. I had some mandarin oranges that I was never going to eat the whole 5-pound bag of.
Nobody ever eats the whole 5-pound bag.
Exactly.
We had the leftover Halloween candy, and then I was like, if it's going to get cold, I was putting socks in these bags.
Yeah,
They were cute, and they were individually little
Paper
inspirational.
bags with little nice notes on them.
And I love
So
what a
nice.
beautiful way to
Amazing.
take something so hard and do something for someone else that's really, it has to help a little bit.
It does help. It really does help a lot. We did this when the kids were younger, and I remember, my youngest was just learning how to spell, but he wrote on the outside of the bag. This is the inspirational thing. We will pray. PREY
Oh, no.
for you.
I hope not.
Aw.
Oh dear.
Oh, that's so cute.
I'm a big believer in our people are still close to us and trying to help us navigate and support us and sending us signs or feelings. Do you have any moments like that where you feel Andrew is near you?
I was really upset because for a long time afterward, like I would go run on the trail, like look at like, where are you, Andrew?
Yes.
Sometimes talking out loud to myself, where are you?
Yeah.
But I think I was just too much in a state of loss to even recognize it. But yeah, I certainly do, and I feel closest to him when we're outside, when we're hiking, or doing some of the things that we love to do together. So I gave his sister a third of his ashes, his ex-wife a third of his ashes. I kept a third of his ashes, and I made these little jars. It's got a little picture on them. It looks like a little party favor, but I take the little jar with me, and so when we go someplace that we love,
That's a great idea.
that we love to go, or someplace he would have been.
Right. Then
Yeah.
it's with you.
Is that with your kids? Like, how are your kids? What was their journey like? Because it wasn't like their dad, right? But they kind of
Yeah.
There was a
adopted him
quote
as
your
a father.
son said it was something, the musician's son. I wish I could remember what it was, but he said, that's how I want to keep living. Because apparently Andrew was like a super positive, never met a stranger type.
Yeah.
And that was a little
Sometimes
daunting
he
for
was a little
you
too social for me.
because you're a little more introverted.
I definitely am.
Do you remember what quote I'm talking about? I'm going to have to look that up because that's bugging me now. But I thought, wow, that's the name of the podcast right there because it was so beautiful. And I think he wrote some songs during that time frame, didn't he?
Yeah. He's a music composition major, so he'll graduate this year. But especially Ethan, because he lived at home, and I used to have a job where I traveled several nights a week for work, and so he'd spend the evenings with Andrew alone, even when the kids weren't there. They were really close.
It's just hard for you
Well,
about them, what they're missing.
Yeah.
As well as you, right?
Well, and not acknowledged, right? I was barely keeping myself together. I was a mess. And I had to go back to work. His counselor at school had to call, and this was weeks afterwards. And she said, I think I think Ethan's grieving. He hadn't stopped to recognize, how much he lost.
Right.
Because,
Well, and he's also like
it was like
watching
losing a father
your
for him,
you
too.
going through so much
Sure.
pain, and that has had to be so hard
Oh,
on
I'm
him.
sure. Yeah, I will tell you, when we went to the memorial at the synagogue, because you have to have it really quickly afterwards by the Jewish tradition, I was a mess, and my son came and got all the tickets and took care of the Airbnb. My older son took care of everything because I just wasn't capable. I was still carrying all the cards he gave me around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
What you just said is so true. The acknowledgement part, you didn't have, I said compassion earlier, but that was wrong. It's this acknowledgement of your loss, the acknowledgement of your children's loss. And I would think in a perfect world that you would be receiving that from his family because they knew who you were to him.
And they were too busy fighting about who I was.
And the thing about it is all it really matters is who you were to his thoughts, not theirs.
Absolutely.
Well, you're definitely not alone, because the person who wrote in, and all of us read it, that apparently it was not easy after the death of her partner as well.
How has your healing been? Because in a way, I feel like part of my healing came from getting that acknowledgement. So how are you finding healing?
So I guess I was able to sort of separate the people who said I wasn't from the people who did acknowledge it. I still check the widow box. If there's a widow box, I'm checking.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Yep.
Check it.
And you still are friends with all of the cycling buddies, I assume.
Yes. As a matter of fact, Andrew had done a big gravel ride in Idaho with one of his best friends from middle school. And the year after, I went and did the bike ride.
Oh,
That's
awesome.
very
So-
cool.
But it's really hard, too, because that community is grieving
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah.
And so every time you show up, you're a reminder of that. And
Yeah.
these are people that don't have to be in my position on a day-to-day basis, right? I think it made me hard to be around because everyone had, felt so much loss.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I do feel that even with us, like the people who, even my husband's parents, they weren't living with him every day. They weren't sitting in that house after he died. Not that they weren't thinking about their loss, they were, but it was a little bit, they got a little reprieve not being in that world every
You
single
don't have
day.
to sit in the middle of it.
Right.
Exactly.
In the same house and the
Yeah.
same
Same
bed
bedroom.
and the same
Yeah.
cars and the same and
The same socks.
yeah, the same socks.
Yeah, you don't get time off from that, right?
No,
Right.
You don't.
You don't. Well, I just am so grateful that you came in today. This is something that people don't consider. This is going to help other people who haven't experienced that tragedy, but if heaven forbid they do, they'll be better prepared.
I hope that's a takeaway that have your stuff in order because and check it and double check it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And enjoy your life together and have all those fun adventures.
Absolutely.
You definitely.
I
believe in
think I'm going to go on a 100-mile bike
that.
right now.
I
With
think
no
I'll
water.
watch you. I'll cheer you on the
I've been
sidelines.
inspired. Thanks again,
Thank you for
Shellie.
coming,
Really
Shellie.
appreciate
Thank
Thank
it.
you so much for
Thank
having
you.
me. I really appreciate you.